My job today, however, is going to be to interview and talk to a guy that I really like a lot, and take a lot of crap for it too, by the way. I want you to know that. Your enemies are like my enemies. They don't want anybody to like the people they don't like. You know. Joe Solomon, chief of police for the city of Methuen. He's had kind of a rocky road as a police chief, but boy, I'll tell you, he's called into this show a number of times. We've done a number of interviews with him. He's never lied to us. Anytime he has said something was going on, I make 3 or 4 phone calls to verify it. Sorry, Chief, it's just my job.
I get it.
And I got to tell you, never once has Chief Solomon told us something and had it turned out not to be true. And this week he tweeted out, I want to make sure I get the right mic. 1, 2, 3, forward. Okay, so you're up. He tweeted out this week an article and some information about some technology that they're going to be using in Methuen. And this technology is, and I'll let him get into more detail, but I'll give you the flavor of it. This technology is going to be installed in Methuen schools and will detect a gunshot within the school. And I would imagine alert police immediately. I guess it's some kind of like an alert alarm system. But I also want to talk to him about a bunch of other things. I want to ask him about NEMLAC. There's a big controversy going on with that, and I think most people don't know what NEMLAC is. So I just kind of want to educate people as to that. And then, if you heard any of our off-the-record discussion when the mic was not supposed to be on, I really want to get into some discussions, depending on how much time he gives us, about the drug situation in Methuen and in the Merrimack Valley. It's not a Methuen issue or a Lawrence issue, and it's not a far-away issue. I think it touches every family. And we were having a discussion off the air about people that we know that are having problems with drugs. Phil Leahy's been in here a number of times, whose daughter was hooked on drugs and has been on a really great campaign to educate families about what's going on. So, Chief, first, let's just say hello. Thank you for coming in. I'm a little, disappointed you didn't come in full dress uniform for my radio show. I know it's only radio, but we do videotape sometimes and put the videos up online. And I kind of thought I was worth. I kind of think I deserve full dress uniform, don't you think? No?
Well, I was going to wear it for you, Tom, but when I went to button it this morning, it was slightly snug.
Oh, okay.
So I decided to dress down for you.
And I
wasn't aware we'd be videotaping also. So.
Well, it's kind of a new thing I started. People started emailing me saying, I was listening to candidate X or Y. It's kind of hard to get a flavor on the radio, but you've met them. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And I started to think, well, maybe if we kind of videotape some of the interviews, take the best clips and put them up online, people can see for themselves. I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm trying to convince people what I think. I just want to present the information from my perspective and the perspective of the guest and let them decide for themselves. So I use it as an additional tool. You don't mind? If you mind, I can shut it off. Okay.
No, not at all.
Sure.
And I'd like to just say hello to all your listeners and thank you and WCAP for having me on today. And I know I've called in several times, and one thing I really respect about you is regardless of the good times or the bad times, whether we want to hear it or not, you tell us the truth. Yeah. So even when it's been information reported on me, but what I did like was at least you did the digging to confirm. And I appreciate that when I say something or I have a conversation with you, that you actually do go out and do the background, because we all make mistakes sometimes, and sometimes you've called me back and we'll go back and research info, maybe a statistic was wrong. But what I found, particularly with the ups and downs that I've seen in the past 8 years, it was nice to have someone report the facts, and I like what you said earlier, let someone else decide.
Right.
You report the facts and let the people decide, and I think that's a good part about the videotape, because you get to see our expressions, you get to see our faces, and I think it allows the people to actually hear it and see it, because you do need the full flavor of what did the person look like when they were talking.
It just provides context, I think.
I agree, and I'd be willing to stay as long as you have questions. I think this is a great source of getting information out, and everything you talk about is in the news, and it is important. We've done a significant amount of work in the drug rehabilitation and education area, and unfortunately every single day that we make arrests after arrest. So I think every subject you mentioned is important. I think we should talk about them all.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're here. It is the day after a holiday. There's a lot of people away, but surprisingly, you would be amazed. I know I am every time I look at the numbers online. I think we really have more people listening online after the show when we post the podcast than we have listening live sometimes. We kind of know what the numbers are, the live numbers, although they'll never tell us officially, because they don't want Warren to know that we have way more listeners than he does. But when I look at the online hits that this podcast gets, I'm always surprised. And we also get the stats on where it's from. We have people from China, people from India, people from Israel, people from Saudi Arabia, all kinds of people from the United Kingdom. And I don't know if they're veterans who are stationed other places who are listening, back home to what's going on. But we have really a very diverse listening audience here at this radio program, and I'm glad that you're here.
Well, and personally, I've read some of your articles and then gone on the website to listen to it myself.
Oh,
because you read the story and you say, okay, and you've said you've posted podcasts, so and it just proves true to what you say. We want to hear it ourselves and see it. So I've gone on, I've listened to your just the audio of a podcast, and I've also watched some of the video. So I think it is a great tool. And with the schedules we all keep, sometimes I can't listen to a certain show at a certain time, and that's why we have DVRs at home.
Right.
So I think the podcast is a great idea, and we've used a lot of YouTube videos when we've had situations occur. And a month later, I'll get views on the YouTube video, and then someone will comment, and they'll bring up good points that we'll go back and look at. So the good thing is it's always there. So it might be a year from now, but somebody will see it because they're interested in it. They do a Google on your subject, and they find it.
Right. So let's get into the main reason why you're here, and I'm actually kind of chomping at the bit for the second and third topic. But let's do this because it is kind of fascinating. Explain to my listeners what the new type of technology is and what it's going to do once it's installed in before we start. Is it going to go in all the schools or just going to have like a pilot school?
It's going to be a pilot school, and we're not going to mention which school it is because of the study.
Right.
We're also working with 2 other communities in the area, and I know that information hasn't been made public yet. We're going to wait for those communities. We asked them to join in with us. So initially, it'll just be in a pilot school in Methuen, and we're working on a grant through the Department of Justice to make it a little bit of a regional attack on this problem. And then also, we're working with a public university, which at this point we can't name, who's going to do a research study for us.
Right. So what is the technology exactly? What is it that it does?
Sure. Well, I think the interesting part is inside indoor detection is new, but this is a tried and true technology. It really comes out of the Boomerang and the Boomerang X, which was developed through a defense contractor and has been used overseas for years by our military. And what it does is it's a little circular device that you wear on your shoulder, and when the Marines, mainly the Marines are using it, Special Forces are out in the field, and a gunshot is fired from a mile away or 200 feet away, it on a little window that they carry in front of them, they can look at it. It gives you the GPS coordinates. It also gives you the clock points. So we were able to obtain a couple of those, and we gave them to our special operations team, and we did some testing with them. And then I was approached by a former Marine who works for a large defense contractor, and said they were interested in trying to take Boomerang X technology, which is acoustics analysis, and taking the acoustic algorithms in the Boomerang and try to convert it to an indoor shot detection system. So about 2 years ago, maybe 18, 19 months ago, we started working with this company. We did multiple tests inside our school at night, during the weekend, during the day. We tested a variety of different weapons. We tested everything from handguns to assault weapons. We tested them as they're made. We tested them with muzzle suppressors to suppress the fire, and then we tested them with silencers that also acted as a muzzle suppressor. And we wanted to see, does a different design or modification prevent the system from actually detecting a shot? And all the shots that we fired in the thousands, it detected all of our shots.
All of them, 100%?
All of them. We had no shot not detected.
Wow.
The interesting thing was, as we worked through it, they would tweak the algorithm. So as we worked through, the final product, I should say, was able to pick up every single one of our shots. And what we liked was, it can identify a shot from a muzzle flash or from the sound. And this has dual capability, so we can compare the two to confirm that it's a shot. We also then collected about a large amount of white data, white noise. We just collected, what does it sound like when a book drops? What does it sound like?
I was just going to ask you that. Like, what about
this is what's important.
Something that sounds like a gunshot, could it set that off?
Right, and well, we have not had that happen as of this point. So books falling, desks up, opening, closing, kids walking, banging on a wall, slamming a door. We did all these tests too, and the technology, again, I'm not a scientist, but the engineers were telling us the acoustic algorithm is what the trick is. And that acoustic algorithm was able to calculate the range for a gunshot. So this is the low where a shot comes in, this is the high. So it knows that if it's in that range, that it's a gunshot. And then it confirms that by reading the IR sensor, the infrared sensor, reads the flash suppressor. So it can compare the two and say, yes, they're both within the range, it is a shot. So that was a significant amount of work just going in the school, being undetected, doing it at nights and weekends, so you can do nighttime and daytime shooting, and collecting all this data, getting it back to the engineers. The engineers were with us when we did this. We used a team of officers. Everybody has been through a SWAT 1 and SWAT 2 tactical class. Everyone were marksmen, and everyone was a member of a special operations team, so that we didn't have to worry about stray rounds in a school, because we wanted to cover every single basis that we had. We didn't want kids coming to school and finding holes in walls.
Right.
So we had to do it the right way.
So let me slow you down, because I know you're on a roll here. So how does it work? You've got a school building has multiple classrooms, multiple closets, multiple areas that echo differently. And I'm only asking out of ignorance because I don't know how this technology works. So if someone's in a classroom 10 classrooms away, I guess what I'm asking is this detection system, is it going to be in every room in a school, or is it just centrally located somewhere that can detect everything within that building?
Well, those are good questions, Tom. And the schools have the ability to do it any way they want. To have complete coverage, and it's still, because they're still tweaking the coverage, we're anywhere between 25 to 50 meters that can cover. So whether it's one in each classroom or two in each classroom, or whether the school decides we just want to do the corridors outside the classroom so it can still pick up the sound, because it's obviously would be between 25 and 50 meters if it was in the corridor.
When you say meters, we're all American. We don't understand that is it. What is a meter? Is it 50 meters? Would be what, like 50 yards?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I don't know the exact
but just like an approximate to people in their
but
mind.
in the approximate for their minds, we're talking anywhere from our testing that we've seen to 30 feet to 150 feet, somewhere in that range. That, depending, again, are you around a corner and behind another solid wall? So of course, because the engineers all use meters, those are statistics, numbers that they gave us, and we've actually mapped them out so we know where they are. Converting it to feet is a little bit tricky question.
Sorry.
That's about where we fall.
I just wanted the people listening
now
to kind of get an idea in their head for what kind of a distance we're talking about.
Okay, and
also because I know nothing about metrics.
okay, no problem. And I'll be corrected if anybody knows the actual conversions, and I can look them up for you later on. But based on the distances I've seen them put in place, that's what we think. Now, you can also just do your main entrances, your hallways, your cafeterias. It's up to each school where they want to tweak it. When we test it, we want to test it with as close to full distribution as possible. And I think really the way we're trying to explain it is as a smoke detector for gunshots. Because people are familiar with smoke detectors, and it helps you in your head say, you know what, we have a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector. Who doesn't have one?
Right.
Why wouldn't we want a shot detection system? Now, it's not the end-all be-all to anything, but it's one more layer. And in Methuen, we've been talking for years, since the early 90s, we like layers of defense.
Right.
Not only do we want a buzzer at the door, but we want a camera at the door. We also want the doors locked. We want certain doors to have swipe keys so that if we needed to respond, we could swipe in and out. We want other doors to have a mechanical key lock for other reasons. We like to have cameras placed in strategical locations. Excuse me.
Are there cops in the Methuen schools now? Do you have a safety officer in like Methuen High School?
Yes, we're actually very lucky in Methuen that we have a police officer in every single school. Not only do we have an officer in every single school when it's open, we have a sergeant who's assigned to supervise the school officers and visit every school. So we had 6 schools.
Because the media tells us that's not the answer and that doesn't work.
Right.
But not to get off track, you have proof that it does work, don't you?
Oh, we absolutely do. And because it isn't, and per se, this isn't about just being able to stop a shooter or reduce the outcome of a shooter. It's about building the relationships, and it's about behavioral analysis. And when an officer is working a school, they form a relationship with the students, the good students and the bad students, the teachers and the faculty. But it's also, as you said, hey, what do I look like when I'm talking? And can you evaluate me better by seeing me? Well, when the school officer is walking through the building, and we may be watching a specific student, maybe a faculty member, he gets to see the behavior of that student, the interactions with other students, and say, you know what? Now I feel that I need to step in and do something more. So it's not just about walking around the school with a gun. It's about being the whole package.
Right.
Being a teacher, getting in classrooms and teach, forming relationships. And I believe it's about situational awareness and behavioral analysis. Walking through the school, and we all went to school and we all said, wow, that kid could always go postal.
Right,
and
yeah.
we always had the kid.
Every
we
class
thought
I was ever in, there was
everyone
always
had
one
someone
kid
that went postal, that we thought could go postal. What we did find out is most of the time it wasn't that kid. It was the other introverted, shy kid
Right.
in the corner. But having a school officer in the school, and it's interesting because as situations arise and we start doing investigations, you know, we've had incidents where we've had threats at the school.
Yes.
We call our school officers in at 10 o'clock at
You
night.
guys stopped a Columbine because you guys had an officer in one of the schools.
And it works. And we've called in officers and said, hey, listen, this is what we know. This, and this. Who do you think could be this person? And they'll give us 3 or 4 names, and lo and behold, it's one of those people that we received a message from through their investigation. So it's truly important to have an officer in every single school. So we had 6 schools up until now. Starting in September, we'll be down to 5 schools because the central high school is closing. Everyone's going to the new high school. So we'll have 5 full-time school officers, 1 full-time sergeant. So we're excited about, I believe we're the first in Massachusetts. I know we're the first in Massachusetts, and I would bet we're pretty close to the first, if not the first in the country, to have a police officer in every single school.
978-454-4980 if you would like to get in and ask questions of Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon. How long have you been a chief?
Since 2002.
So,
12 years.
Okay, I went the long time. My math's not that good. And how long have you been a cop?
28 years.
So 28 years a police officer, at least 12 years as a police chief. Folks, this is a guy who knows his stuff. He's not a politician. He doesn't run for office. He's not out there trying to push gun bans, and he's not out there trying to push a political, liberal or conservative agenda. He's only here to tell us what's real on the ground, and you don't get that in most media. Most media, you've got the talking heads of the left and the right, and they're talking abstractly about whether or not we should put guns in schools, what works, what doesn't work, but they don't actually have first-hand real experience. And that's why I like to bring newsmakers in, like police chiefs and people who are on the ground, because they can tell you from first-hand experience, from trial and error, what works, what doesn't work, and what their experience is. Bob, you are on the line with Police Chief Joe Solomon. Bob, you are on the line with Police Chief Joe Solomon. Going once. Going twice. Bobby T, hello? He's gone. 978-454-4980. We have a question on Twitter from Joe. Joe wants to know, is Methuen a sanctuary city, and how does the Methuen Police Department work with immigration when you arrest somebody who's an illegal alien?
Well, what we
Tough
do,
question right out of the
it
gate.
is a tough question, and I know that secure communities has been a subject of debate on both sides. And what we do is we follow the law, and the law is when we make an arrest, we fingerprint our prisoners. We enter the fingerprints into the FBI system. What the FBI does is the FBI then runs those fingerprints through the ICE detainer database. If ICE is interested in detaining a prisoner, then they would contact Methuen Police Department and we would cooperate with them. I think the confusion and the political rhetoric around secure communities is that we randomly pick people out in the street.
Right.
If you're an illegal immigrant in this community and you've been a victim of a crime, feel free to call us, because guess what? We're not going to fingerprint you. We're not going to run you through the system. But whether you're here legally or you're here illegally, if you get arrested, we're fingerprinting you.
Right.
We're running your fingerprints through the system. So only those arrested. So we're not designated as a sanctuary, and yet we are not a secure community designation that we go out and look for illegal immigrants. But if you've been charged with a crime and under arrest, we will run your fingerprints. And if ICE asks us to detain you, and it's a detainment based upon a criminal charge, we will detain you.
Now, with all the political rhetoric aside, because we know what the media propaganda is, we know what the Republicans and the conservatives say, on the ground, what do you see? What is the result? Have you been able to take violent people who are illegal aliens, run this fingerprints through the system, have ICE come in and say, this is a really bad guy, we need to take this guy out?
Absolutely, we have, and we have not in Methuen, and you know, we were one of the big community policing departments, and we've converted that over to quality policing. We have a good relationship with our community, and there isn't anyone in our community that we've run into that's been afraid to talk to us. And we have had situations where an illegal immigrant is a victim, so we tell them it's okay. We're not here. That's not our job.
Yeah, you're not fingerprinting victims. You're
We're
not
not.
fingerprinting people who come in to file complaints about sexual assault or
Absolutely
domestic
not.
violence. It's once people are arrested for a
Only
crime.
when they're arrested. And we have had situations in the past where we've run fingerprints and there's been no hit on the FBI, and the person is Joe Solomon. And a day and a half later, while he's being held on other charges, ICE will call us and say, hey, this just flagged. By the way, this is so-and-so who's already been deported twice. And we'll say, yeah, he's being held in Middleton on our charges. So sometimes it even helps you identify someone. And everyone thinks that we do these fingerprints and snap, ICE is at our door.
Right.
You may get a call in 5 minutes. This is a person who's been wanted for murder.
Right.
And bang, right away we get the call. But on the other charges, it's a day, maybe a day and a half later, and if they've already been released, we provide ICE with the info, and it's up to them to go track the
Go
person
pick 'em
down.
up. So you
we
guys-
don't go running around chasing after them to pick them up on an immigration case. However, to be fair, if ICE came into our department and said, hey, we need to go find me 6 people, we treat them just like the FBI, the DEA, the Lawrence Police, or the Haverhill Police. We go help them because we're law enforcement officers.
This is a fascinating discussion because what we hear every day in mainstream media, what we hear every day from cable news media and from certainly the Democrat Party and the propagandists who want to take away guns, who want to let all the illegals in, whatever their political agenda is a very different story than what we see live on the ground. And I tell my friends all the time, I usually use Lawrence as an example when we talk about welfare and illegal aliens, but Methuen is a predominantly white community, still has the same problems. These problems are not isolated to Lawrence. And if you look at what goes on the ground, it does not comport with what the politicians say is going on in America, and it does not comport with what the media says is going on the ground in America. And I'm fascinated that you have encountered people that ICE has come in and said, these are very dangerous guys, we've got to remove them, we've got to start the deportation process and pick them up. But people who have been victims of domestic violence, or people who have been victims that come to file a police report, they're not being fingerprinted and just willy-nilly thrown on a plane and sent out of the country the way it's portrayed.
Oh, absolutely not. And I can't speak for other departments or other parts of the country, but it absolutely is not happening here. And we value everybody. Everybody, really, how many of us aren't immigrants? My grandparents on both sides, all 4, were born in Lebanon and all immigrated to the United States, and now I have a good life because of them coming here. We're all immigrants at some time in our life, in our generation. So,
Sure.
and we absolutely, a victim is a victim is a victim. And one of the things that aggravates me, and I've had these conversations with law enforcement all the time, how does a victim become the suspect? And how do suspects become victims sometimes? Right. I want to make sure if you're a victim, you're a victim. Now, if you're a victim, but you've also done something, like, maybe you're a victim and you've been assaulted, but you were assaulted because you just broke into someone's house and stabbed them.
Right.
Well, we're going to treat you as a victim. We're going to get you your aid, but we're also going to charge you.
Right.
You just might not be arrested, but you're still going to be charged.
And we see in Lawrence all the time, people who go looking to buy drugs, come upon some unsavory character, ask them to buy drugs, and they get robbed.
Correct.
Well, you were there to either solicit a prostitute or to buy drugs. You're a victim. You're also a suspect. You've also committed a crime.
Correct. So there is.
But unless you're arrested, though, you're saying they don't get fingerprinted.
We don't fingerprint them unless we do not fingerprint anyone unless they're arrested, except in some cases. If there's a gang situation we're dealing on, we legally can take someone's fingerprints on the scene so we can compare them maybe to other fingerprints we have. But there has never been a case in my 12 years that we fingerprinted someone to see if the person is a legal immigrant. And I think that, my personal opinion, is that's stepping on people's civil rights. And I know it's not a civil rights violation, but you have a right to live here and you have a right to be free. The federal government's job is to control immigration. And now, we're going to cooperate with them when they want to go get somebody who's a violent criminal, but it's not our job to go hurt people. And now I know that can hurt me on both sides.
Right, sure.
Some people believe we should be hurting everybody out, and other people believe we shouldn't be hurting anyone out. But you know what? what's our job? What's our responsibility? Serve and protect and enforce the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the city of Methuen, and that's what we do.
Right.
We will continue to always do that, and please, if we don't, call us on it. And sometimes, as Tom, we've had these conversations. Just because I'm the chief, I don't know everything.
Right.
I might not know what happened Friday night at 3 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes you've called me and told me, and I'm like, yeah, Tom, I don't think so, but let me make a call. And I call you back and say, you have better sources than me. So, maybe that's the
I'm always surprised, with the Sahara Club shooting, I called you and said, I think it was, I don't know, like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I felt bad because you sounded like I'd woken you up.
Yeah.
And by the way, thank you for always taking my call at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, Chief, did you guys just have a murder over at the Sahara Club? And you said, I don't think so, but let me make a call. Mm-hmm. And, so people think that because you're chief, you know everything. Like, you instantly have an instant pipeline to everything going on 24/7, but you sleep too. You have days off too.
And I'm lucky enough that I have a great staff. I have good captains and good lieutenants who take turns being in charge. And when they're in charge of their bureau, they take all the calls, they handle the situation, and similar to the Sahara, afterwards, maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, they would have called and said, this is a situation, it's under control, this is what we had, and at that point, they briefed me. So I'm lucky enough to have a good command staff that they don't have to call me every 15 minutes. And, we believe in the executive development principle. They have to make their decisions, and I have to live with sometimes mistakes are made or bad decisions are made, and that falls with me, but that's life. And you have to trust your people, because if you do everything, you become a dictator.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. 978-454-4980. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask Chief Solomon, give us a little details on that execution that happened at the Sahara Club. I don't believe they've made an arrest of the person who's guilty, of the person who did it. Still, I think, a fascinating case. There have been some developments. We reported on them, then I got my rear end kicked for reporting on them. There's also some DEA cases in Methuen the last couple of years, and I apologize to our friends at the Drug Enforcement Agency for posting photos. I didn't realize the cars on the lawn were actually DEA cars. I thought they were like the cars of the people they were arresting, and we put them up and the plate numbers were on them. We had to pull them down immediately, and I apologize for that. Sometimes in the news business, you don't have all the facts either, and you're taking pictures and you're posting them and not realizing what's up there. So we'll talk about a couple of those things. And then I want to get into some other stuff. I really want to talk about the drug epidemic in Massachusetts, in this country, the drug cartels that are taking advantage of people, and what it means for families in Methuen and Lawrence in the Merrimack Valley. Back after this. On Paying Attention Where Everybody Gets It, even Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon. In the studio, we have Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon. We've touched on a number of subjects. We've talked about the shooter detection system. We've talked about illegal immigration and ICE. I understand that maybe at the top of the hour, right after news, we may have someone from the company, shooter detection system, calling in to talk about how this technology works.
Correct. The owner, Christian Connors, of Shooter Detection Systems, should be calling in around 11 o'clock.
That's great. In the meantime, do you want to stay on this topic, or do you want to just bounce around until he calls in?
Well, if we could just talk a little bit more about it,
sure.
And then we'll move on, because I think the important part is that this is an integration system, so we're glad because we were able to be on the ground floor to help develop it, and I think that says a lot, because we got to put in the law enforcement aspect and the school aspect as to what you'd like to see. And the school aspect being nondescript, so it's installed, nobody can tell it's there, so it's not disruptive to students, and I think that's important. It also goes hand in hand with the training that we've been giving. We've trained all the faculty, staff at this point into an emergency response system that includes lockdown and evacuation, which runs hand in hand with the shooter detection system. But from being able to test the system and seeing what it can do, we had made some suggestions. And some of the suggestions were that it allows an immediate alert, because the biggest problems police have is, what is the time that it takes from something to occur for it to be reported? And then once it's reported and the police arrive at the scene, how much time is it from arrival to time to contact, because now the person has moved? Right. And the advantage of this system is it's automated. So what we always call the OODA loop. Someone has to observe something, they have to orient to it, they have to decide what it is that they saw, they have to take some action. And all that wrapped in, for a layperson in a shooting situation, could take a significant amount of time. There may be 30 second to a minute delay. With the system being automated, as soon as the gunshot is detected, it'll send an emergency alert out. It'll go to all our cruisers and our laptops. It'll go to either text messaging or apps on our phones, and it'll go.
So automatic. This is
automatic.
The gunshot goes off. You don't have to wait for someone to pick up the phone and call 911 and say, we just heard a gunshot in our building.
Correct. It takes the human error out, and it reduces the time.
Even though that could be seconds, those seconds could save children's lives.
Oh, absolutely. And in a situation like this, it turns out not to be seconds. It turns out to be longer because someone has to run for cover because they just saw what happened. They have to get somewhere safe. They're shaking. They got to get their phone out. And then what we found is when they call, they're either whispering or they're hysterical, and it takes you a while to calm them down. So if you could save 30 seconds to a minute, up to sometimes some of the first calls that have come in shooting scenes at schools have been 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. Think of the amount of devastation you could reduce. The second part is, not only is it sending out an alert, and again, it's modular, so you don't have to have this, but you have the ability to have microphones turn on and a camera turn on in each system, and now you can listen to what's going on in the school, you could hear where the shots are, and as if more shots were fired, it gives you the locations in the school because each one of them is either going to have a GPS location or a school location. So as you're responding, it'll say System 1 outside classroom 340 or the GPS location, so it'll direct us to it. Now you arrive at a school 3 to 5 minutes later, and all of a sudden,
if he's moved to a different classroom and he shot somebody else again, you've got that
system
additional
goes
data.
off.
Right.
So that system will go off. So it helps you guide it. And then one of the other things that will allow you to do is to talk to the person through the system. And if you look at the psychologies, when most shooters that are active killers, I'm not going there to kill just Tommy Duggan because he upset me. I'm going there to do mass killing.
Right.
When they're confronted and someone interjects themselves either physically or just they hear sirens of cruisers coming or they hear the police are here or someone tells them the majority of them end it at that point by committing suicide. Now, not that we want
which is somebody, a good thing, I think.
Well, and not that I want anyone
to kill themselves. I know you can't say that, but I can.
But if they stop the shooting, whichever way they stop it, that's good for us.
Right.
So by us getting on it and saying, hey, sir, we see you in the white shirt with the green pants with the gun. You're in corridor A. You don't turn the corner. The police officers around the corner. They're coming to get you. Put down your gun. Give up. They don't want to give up control. So they have to take their own lives because that's the final control.
Right.
So all these different technologies that we've made suggestions that they've agreed to incorporate, you don't have to have them in your school if you don't want them, or your library, or your radio station, or your police station, or your government building.
We definitely need one of these in the Valley Patriot offices.
I think based on some of your reporting, you should have one on your shoulder when you're walking around. But the different technology there, and I think the important things is reducing the human element and eliminating it so it's automated. And number two, reducing, once I arrive on the scene, I know from my dispatch or from my laptop or from my app where that person has moved to. And it's just remarkable that we're at this point. And when we first started working with the company 2 years ago, we were saying all these ideas. We're saying, this is a great idea. What about this? But too bad technology doesn't exist. And the answer is, oh yeah, technology exists. It's in the military. We just need to be able to utilize it. So thank God, knock on wood, for our military and for the millions and millions of dollars of research and development that went into the Boomerang X, which is the heart and soul of the Guardian. So this isn't just some system that was developed out of thin air. It was a military.
This wasn't some kid in his basement who came up with a good idea. This is years of technology that was developed by the military.
Absolutely, and years of testing it out in an actual battlefield and tweaking it to the point that we know it works in the outside. And here's an even further advantage to that. Now we know we have an indoor shot detection system. There's also an outdoor shot detection system.
That's great.
Because you can take the Guardian and you can take the Boomerang, and there's a conversion of the Boomerang that works outside. And you can have an indoor-outdoor system if you so wanted to. So it's many different.
So here's what I'm envisioning, because this is fascinating. The more I talk to you, the more I'm fascinated by this. I really kind of had a general interest when you first called me on this, but now I'm completely fascinated. So we have in Methuen and in the Lawrence area, it's right on the border of the Arlington neighborhood, which has been always probably the biggest crime problem in Methuen. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. You guys have done some amazing work reducing the crime thanks to, what's her name?
Linda Susie.
I'm sorry, Linda. I apologize.
And the whole Arlington neighborhood.
I love Linda so much. It was just a brain freeze. Thanks to people like Linda Susie, thanks to the Methuen Arlington neighborhood group, you guys have done some amazing job reducing crime there. However, now I'm getting visions in my head of using a boomerang system or this gunshot detection system on a telephone pole on a street corner in the Arlington neighborhood, so that even if there isn't a witness to call 911, if somebody does a drive-by shooting, if somebody pulls a gun on someone and shoots them during a drug deal, you guys automatically, right away, that second will know.
Correct. And, you know, in the conversations with the company, they have already deployed in other locations tests for the external system. But from what I know and from my reading just about the military, it's already been in use. And in fact, you could see pictures of Hummers overseas with these huge microphones that look like this, of course in the OD green.
Right.
Those are external shot detection systems built off that Boomerang X. And I'm sure if Chris gets to call in at 11, he can explain that. But those are one of our visions too. And again, we don't want to scare people that say that, hey, there is a need for this. But what we always say is it's multiple levels of defense. I hope that generations to come, this is never ever used, and it's installed and never goes off.
There's never a need for it. Yeah.
There's never a need for it. But if it's there, why not use it?
Right.
Whether it's inside, outside, combination of it. And that's the same reason to say, well, maybe we don't need 10 officers working, because for calls for services we can handle them with 6. But God forbid a situation rises, you want to have those people. Just like when we had the fireworks, we don't have 8 police officers there, we have 30 police officers there. So God forbid some type of a situation occurs, as simple as the storm rolling in, and it being able to make a decision, as the mayor did, to shoot the fireworks early, but then have 30 officers to run traffic posts to help people get out and get home and be safe. So one of the things sometimes my critics say is, Joe Solomon likes to look at worst case scenario. Well, you can't do law enforcement if you look at best case scenario, because then you're behind the scenes.
Well, that's
you
the political
forward.
That's the political problem with America today, is that we wanna pretend a threat may never happen. You know, I remember Jay Carney, the president's spokesman, at one point last year said the borders are secure. We've secured the borders. We're not worried. It's not gonna happen. We're not gonna have a flood of people coming over the border. Well, then it happened, right? Had they been more proactive and thought more like you and didn't have a political agenda on the side, and they'd said, look, what's the worst case scenario? What happens if 10,000 Mexicans storm the border all at once? Are we prepared for that? We're not prepared for that. If they had your idea, your model of thinking, we would be prepared for that. And what's going on right now in America wouldn't be happening.
Well, you know, thanks for saying that, and I agree with you on many different points there, and I really believe that the advantage to being the cop and not the politician is I don't have to worry about the political views. It may harm me because people may be upset over it, but I have a job, and my job is to worry about law enforcement. So you may not agree, and you may not agree. You might think it's a bad political statement, particularly even talking about secure communities. Nobody wants to talk about it, but you know what? We do what we need to do. We do what we need to do by looking at technology like this and trying to work together as a team to say, you know, what can we envision happening in 2 or 3 years? Because this is a long-term project.
All right, we have to take a quick news break. We'll be back with Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon. We're going to talk a little bit more about drugs in the Merrimack Valley. We're going to talk about the recent almost school shootings at Methuen High School and what he and his department did to prevent it. Back after this, I'm paying attention where everybody gets it, even Joe Dunn from Tewksbury. Big boss man. All right, we're talking to the big boss man of Methuen. He is Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon, 28 years as a police officer, putting his life on the line to protect the people of Methuen. 12 years as the chief, and by the way, still putting his life on the line. I've gone to fires, I've gone to shootings, I've gone to drug arrests. I follow police calls in the Merrimack Valley myself. I'm like almost every other reporter out there that calls himself a reporter. And I have seen Joe Solomon at the scene of events when the guys are ready to go in, and he's going in with them. He's not the guy that says, I'm going to be the commander in the back that directs everybody. He's one of the first guys in the door when his guys are going in. And just because he's a police chief doesn't mean he's not putting his life on the line. So thank you, Chief, for putting your life on the line, not just for the people of Methuen. Sometimes you guys chase people into Lawrence, chase people into Salem, New Hampshire, and you're on the scene too, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On the line we have, what's his name, Chris Pavillon?
Chris Connors.
Chris Connors is on the line. He is from the gunshot detection system, right?
Yes, shooter detection
system. Chris, you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the beginning of the show. We've been talking with Police Chief Joe Solomon from Methuen about this system that they're going to be testing in the Methuen schools and in other areas in Massachusetts. And I'm really fascinated by this technology. I wasn't when we started the conversation, but as it has evolved, as this conversation has developed, we've learned that not only is this good for using in schools for school shootings, but it's also something that you can put on telephone poles in maybe bad neighborhoods, so that the second a gunshot goes off, police are immediately notified. Can you talk about that?
Yes, we're not in that market currently, but it's something we're certainly looking at to combine both the outdoor capabilities that we work with as well as the indoor gunshot, and then combining those to have an urban product.
All right, well, thanks for calling. Good night. No, I'm just kidding. You there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good morning.
I was looking for a little bit longer of an answer, but that's okay. The chief... The chief wanted to have you on, and I'm glad that you're here. Can you talk about how this technology works? How does this work? The chief talked a little bit about in the Department of Defense when the military is using it. Kind of looks like a microphone on the Humvees. What does it look like when you're using it for urban settings?
And actually, what we did was take the military capability and they put it in a very benign-looking box that looks the same as like a switch or an outlet that you have. So it fits into a standard electrical box, can be screwed in and up and running in a couple seconds. So what we try to do is, obviously for schools, you don't want to have anything too threatening looking, so we took that capability and made sure it looked, again, non-threatening, similar to what they would see today on the walls of the schools.
And how does the technology actually work? I'm not a techno geek, but maybe you can kind of dumb it down for those of us who aren't techno geeks.
Sure, and I'm not either, so I work with a lot of smart guys, but I'm not one of them. So what's been developed over the last 10, 15 years, the Department of Defense and DARPA and the prime contractor that we bought the technology from, was basically to write the world's best algorithms, that software that can understand and listen for the sound of a gunshot and pick that out from other noises, which is the key. You can't have false alerts, especially in schools, but even the military, of course. And then what we did was to validate, that's an extremely accurate software, but then we validate that software when it hears with the two infrared cameras that are in the system. They're actually infrared sensors, they're not cameras. And that looks for the muzzle flash. So when a weapon's fired, there's, even in a silenced weapon, there is some energy that comes out the front of the weapon. So we combine both listening and looking, and then immediately let everyone know that a shot has occurred in that area.
978-454-4980 is the phone number if anyone would like to call in with a question for Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon or Chris Connors from. Is the name of the company Shooter Detection System? I want to get it right at least once during the show.
No, that's fine. I appreciate it. It is. It's Shooter Detection Systems.
And so how was your company formed? Are you guys a bunch of former military guys that saw this stuff being used out in the field and said, hey, this would be great to use in urban settings?
Yes, what we looked at is I headed up all the business development for the military system, so we brought that to market, and Secretary of Defense Gates actually signed only about 6 orders the whole time he was Secretary of Defense, and this was the last one, so we certainly understood the criticality of getting this out to the field fast and helping save soldiers' lives, of which, there's been reports of over 200 lives saved by the military system. So we looked at that and talked to the contractor that owned it, and decided it was something we wanted to bring to market for schools and buildings, especially in light of all the recent activity of building shootings, including in the government. The Navy Yard had that shooting as well. And what we kept hearing over and over was, we didn't know how many shooters there were. It took minutes to have someone call the police, and then when we arrived, there was really no way for us to know where the shooter was currently located. So we took the military system and tried to incorporate, Chief Solomon and other police chiefs and superintendents that we spoke with and safety officials, and then brought it to market. We do have a significant portion of the company are retired Navy SEALs that have just gotten out, so certainly they've helped us to be able to both understand the security piece, how to secure a building, as well as what to do with the information that comes out of the box. So I think they've been invaluable helping us bring the product to market.
Have you had any success with this technology in any actual urban or suburban settings in schools, or is it still just really in the developmental stage?
Yeah, no, so it's in between the two. So we bought the company, or started the company up in November of last year. We took the military capability, which was great, but it was too expensive, obviously. So we've spent the last 6 months redesigning the box so it would be at a commercial price point. And now we're at that point where we're ramping up in production and starting to outfit both Methuen and some other locations as well.
Now, I'm going to be writing a story for our newspaper on this. It'll be out on Tuesday. We're going to give you guys tons of free publicity. You guys are located in Newburyport.
Yeah, in Raleigh, a little bit south of Newburyport.
Okay, we're actually in Raleigh, in the Market Basket in Raleigh, so you'll be able to pick the paper up if you live in that area.
Great.
We only ask that, like, with all of these billions and billions of dollars you're going to be making with all these government grants, that you think of us in the future, because we're a free paper, we survive on advertising.
All right, we definitely will.
Chief Solomon, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Chris to try and get a little bit more information out to the people who, even Chris Pubalon, who is a much younger guy who normally is kind of bored by our political conversations, said during the break he's fascinated by all this because he's got 2 kids in public school system.
No, that's great. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Chief. How are you?
Good. Chris, I think, I touched on a lot of how the system works, and you've just given them an overview, but what I found very interesting myself, and personally I think from the parents I spoke to that they find deeply, is the real reason for putting this system into schools. And when you had talked earlier before on one of the newscasts about why you wanted to see this system in schools, do you want to just touch on that so it's less about the technology and what was the real purpose you were trying to gain?
Sure, and I have 2 school-age children myself, Coleman and Lily, and they're in 2 different schools locally. So when you hear about these events and you hear what the problems were, we thought this was applicable to help address that. And again, if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. But when you look at, say, Sandy Hook, where it was 6 minutes almost for someone to call the police, and the last shooting and death occurred 10 minutes after it started, if you just do the simple math and you could save those 6 minutes, I think children's lives would have been saved. So we almost looked at it as an obligation. We're still working with the military systems as well, but we looked at it as an obligation to bring this to market and get it in the hands of people who can help save lives, which are the police.
Now, eventually, Chris, is this going to be available to the public? I mean, once you guys have worked the bugs out, and is that your goal, to make this commercially marketable? Because as Chief said in the last hour, as a reporter, I write a lot of stories that piss off a lot of people, and this might be something I might want to have near my office.
They absolutely will be, and when the product is done, just to make sure we're clear, we've fired thousands and thousands of rounds. We haven't been able to false alert the system yet, so it's going into production, meaning thousands of units we placed orders for in anticipation of what we plan to do at the market. But yes, we're actually going to one of the largest airports in the country this month, and we're going to do a temporary install. They have an issue. We're working with commercial customers who have, say, things like trading floors or sensitive security areas that they need to have this type of information out immediately if a shooting happens. So yes, it will actually be available. We've hired a local dealer, so in every state that we're going into, which is all 50 and overseas, we'll have a dealer network that if you call up, they have one on stock and they can come in and install it a week later. We're trying to keep this very simple.
Where are these being physically produced? Are they being produced in the United States?
Yes, they're currently being produced both here in New Hampshire and California right now, and then we're looking to expand that maybe to a couple other states as well, depending on what the need is.
Can I put in a plug, because the chief won't, but can I put in a plug for maybe the Methuen area? They could use some technology jobs in that area.
Sure, no, we're certainly open to that. We're, again, just sourcing the units now and placed their first orders, and we certainly be looking for economic development areas as well, which is, we've done that in the past with military systems, with economic areas. There's incentives actually to work with those folks in there, and that would be great.
What is the cost to a community? I mean, I know that there's going to be grants at the beginning, but once those grants run out, communities are going to want to buy them on their own. What is the cost, or the projected cost, once you guys stop mass producing these things for each of these units?
Sure. So we don't give out the exact price point for competitive reasons, since we believe we're first to market with the capability. But when we took a look, there's a lot of schools installing cameras, so it's at a similar, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, price point to installing a camera system in a school. And that's basically what we're letting people know is the rough idea what that is.
Great. Can I jump in there for a minute?
Go ahead, please.
Chris, I'm glad you just mentioned the camera, because we were talking earlier and I really didn't address it, and maybe you can talk about it. The question always comes up, well, is this going to replace metal detectors and cameras and alarms on doors? And do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We certainly, we believe we have great capability, but we're not the only solution to this problem. So we've set the system up to integrate with just about anything else that a school has. If they don't have anything, this system is a standalone system, but in the commercial market, say, we've already integrated with both camera systems. We can actually slew cameras to look at the shooter. We can help sound a different type of alarm. send notification out, which again, the chief has been a big help of what he wants to see and what he believes other chiefs will want to see. Something similar to, say, an Amber Alert that goes on everyone's text phone. We can also integrate with maps, so of the school itself, and we do that. So when the police come to the location, they can actually see on the map where the last shooting occurred and then listen for the sound of what's happening inside the building with a separate microphone if the chief and the superintendent want that. And again, it basically allows us to be a piece of an overall puzzle, as well as making sure we're integrated with the protocols. One of the reasons we wanted to work with Methuen and Chief Solomon and the Superintendent Judy was they have some significant training already done. So their police, when they roll up, they know what to do. So we've integrated this capability into their first response plan, which is the key to the whole system.
Chris Connor, I appreciate you calling into the program and trying to educate our audience. Is there anything else you want to share with us to educate people about this upcoming technology that is probably going to end up everywhere? This sounds like if you guys are successful, this sounds like this is going to be something that every school, maybe even police department, and other places that might be dangerous, that people might not want guns to be fired, concert halls, Foxborough, Fenway Park. I would imagine this is going to be something that's going to be integrated into part of our culture.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a short-term goal. We've been talking to all the local congressmen and senators. We've explained what this device is, and we'll be working with them over time to have some kind of regulations put in. As you know, smoke alarms were regulated in the 50s, and there hardly hasn't been a single school death due to fire, with alarms and early alarms being a key to that system. And there's been well over 200 people killed in school shootings. So we're working with those folks, and hopefully down the road this will be something that's somewhat mandated in a piece of an overall security measure when these incidents happen.
Do you guys have a website?
We do. It's www.shooterdetectionsystems, a lot of words, but .com, so it's all one word, shooterdetectionsystems.com.
All right, great. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know it's a holiday weekend, and you should probably be off somewhere at a barbecue with your family, so thanks.
It's my wife's birthday, so I appreciate you letting me come on for a few minutes. But
what's her name?
I got trouble too, short, so thank you.
Well, you know what? Happy birthday, Jessica. We hope you have a great birthday for the rest of the day, and I won't keep your husband any longer.
I'll let her know. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. Take care, Chief.
All right, Chris, thanks. Talk to you later. We appreciate the support of your company helping our city.
All right, 978-454-4980. I'm fascinated. by all this.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is, because you think about where this can lead.
Yeah.
I mean, if they can detect shotguns, what else will they be able to detect? I mean, think about the different types of crimes and problems that police departments have. I mean, you guys are now starting to, at least for the last few years, starting to deal with other types of threats like chemical threats,
right.
Bomb threats. If they can detect a gunshot, maybe they can detect an unexploded bomb. Maybe they can, with this technology, as it grows, as it develops, it always gets better. It always expands, right?
Right. Do you ever watch Persons of Interest? That show?
Oh, I did watch that once. Yes.
And I know this isn't the same thing, and of course, Person of Interest seems like Big Brother.
Yeah.
But isn't it amazing? And you know what? I sit there and watch it as sometimes that conspiracy theory gets into your brain, and I say, you wonder if the government really has. I mean, we didn't know about facial recognition for all those years that they had it. And imagine if that was loaded into all public cameras, facial recognition, and they said, we're looking for Joe Solomon, who's just committed this heinous crime, and he's somewhere in the United States, and facial recognition ran on every single camera in the United States. Now, I get the privacy people flipping out over that, but
yeah, I'm one of them.
Well, let me tell you something. I've had this conversation about red light cameras. Remember that?
Yes.
We did a study back in 2006, 2004, and again in 2006. And I don't remember the numbers in my head, but start at the Salem, New Hampshire line on Route 28 and drive to the Lawrence line in that 1 mile strip. There was something like over 100 times you were on camera because of private security systems in the area and ATMs.
Right.
So if we're so worried about privacy, why don't we look around and see what's already out there? How many people, I know a lot of people who actually have their alarm systems at their house, they have indoor and outdoor cameras.
Right.
And I was with someone the other day and they go, oh, check this out, here's my house in Maine. And the person pulled up the outside of their house, the inside of their house, then turned the air conditioning on their house, and it was amazing. Even at night, the infrared cameras, they could see their yard. So I understand privacy is an issue, but it's already out there, because as you drive around and down the streets, I'll bet you as you walk down here in downtown Lowell, right outside here, that between the number of city cameras and business cameras, you couldn't walk a block without being on camera.
I think the problem that we're having, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's someplace I definitely wanted to go during this discussion. I think the problem that people like myself have, I'm a First Amendment guy, and I'm very unsettled by all these cameras going up in the Merrimack Valley, hoping to write a story about it in the coming month, is that Santander Bank may have a camera that I might be on when I'm walking by, but they're not looking for facial recognition. They're not storing who I am and where I am at that location. They don't have license plate readers that are logging where my car is at that intersection. And it's not going into a government database that can then be used against me maybe later on down the road, where they're looking for a certain guy at a certain time and they see, oh well, Duggan was there, maybe he saw that guy. Yeah. Come to my house and say, well, Duggan, you were there at about the same time. Did you see the guy? I may not want to get involved. I may say,
but that's going on. That's going on now, because when we have a crime,
but it's scary. That's what I'm saying.
What we do is we walk the neighborhoods and look at the fire where the 2 firemen in Boston died.
Yes.
They went to a business, actually a condo unit, got a camera, and from that camera were able to find the welding company. When we have crimes, not only are we going door to door asking questions and doing this, the field interrogation, we ask, do you have a camera? Yeah. And then we'll say, and it's funny that you say that, because we're like, who's that person? Oh, that's Billy Jones down the street. He lives at 18 Maple Street. We go and see Billy and say, Billy, you walked by yesterday at 1 o'clock. Did you happen to notice anything suspicious? You go, well, I heard some glass breaking and I saw a green van, but I really didn't get the plate. But And I know on the privacy side it's here, but
I don't want the cops knocking on my door because
That's amazing, though, isn't it? What we could solve. And how about this? Back in 1996, we had a child killed on Washington Street, hit and run. And I was talking to a state trooper, and he said, hey, why don't you call NASA? And I started to laugh at him, like, yeah, okay, I'm going to get on the phone and call NASA. He goes, no. He goes, I'm serious. I was a lieutenant at the time doing accident reconstruction. He goes, call NASA, because as the satellites fly over, they take pictures around the world and around the country. So we called them to say, at this time, here's the location. They looked up the latitude, longitude. Was there a satellite over? Because what I didn't realize was that satellite can be zoomed in from an old video and actually tell you what the license plate was of a car going by. And unfortunately, they didn't have one. But think of how many years ago that was.
I got a great story for you that totally confirms what you just said. I was driving airport limo for Andover livery at the time. The night that OJ killed his wife, I picked up 2 guys at Logan Airport. One of them was law enforcement, but he was federal law enforcement, and he gets in the car with his friend who had come in from a different flight, and they're having a conversation in the back seat. And the guy says to his friend, did you hear about OJ's wife? Someone killed OJ's wife. He said, no, I didn't hear it, because it hadn't yet hit the news, right? He said, yeah, I guess they've got the satellite footage, but they're afraid that people are going to find out that they've got satellite footage of everything everybody's doing. So they're trying to find other ways to tie him to the crime. Now, I'm just a taxi driver. I'm just some dopey guy going to Northern Essex driving a taxi, listening to all this going, they've got to be having this conversation for my benefit because it just sounds so outrageous. Right. But an hour later, breaking news comes on the radio after I dropped them off. They suspect O.J. Simpson might have killed his wife. Now, they didn't say O.J. Simpson's wife is dead. They're looking for the suspect. They said, we think O.J. Simpson killed his wife. And it automatically brought that conversation back that even back then, now I can't remember what year that was, 90, maybe 5, 96?
Right in that time frame of my hit and run.
They were already using satellite footage over neighborhoods, over cities, over towns, and taking pictures, and law enforcement was already using it. They just weren't telling anybody.
Right. Well, look at the shot detection system. The Boomerang and the Boomerang X was being used in Iraq and Afghanistan. So at least 10, 12 years ago, this technology existed.
Right.
We're just behind the 8 ball finding out about it. And, one of the interesting things for us, too, with this is that most law enforcement ingenuity starts on the West Coast and comes east. For this time, it starts on the East Coast and it can go west.
That's great.
That's one up on the West Coast that we have.
Are you worried? Because I am. Are you worried about the militarization? I'm not as worried as the conspiracy nuts. But are you worried about the militarization of police, where we've got NEMLAC, and I'd like to talk about that a little after this next break, where we're basically making police officers Army men, or we're basically making them Marines. And when we watch what happened in Boston, and I mean, you certainly have had a couple of instances in Methuen where you've had those big tanks come in for certain situations. Do you worry, though, that we are now militarizing our urban areas, our suburban areas?
Well, there's a personal opinion and there's a police chief's opinion.
Well, I just want the police chief's opinion.
And I'll give you the police chief's opinion. I have concern, but I don't have worry. And what it all comes down to is who's in charge. Mm-hmm. So you have to have your trusted leader, and that's where this time the politicians should be watching over our law enforcement. And I've never hidden from the press or from any of. We've had to go around with the Second Amendment people. We've had some First Amendment people come around at us, and we're open. We're there. It is a concern, but here's what I look at: when we're actually out in the street, and now we're moving into a location where we know there's barricaded doors, the people inside may be armed, and we're either serving a warrant or we're trying to get in to extract a person that's inside the house. Why would I not want my officers behind an armored vehicle? Again, there's no rifles on the armored vehicle, but behind an armored vehicle or inside an armored vehicle that can stop a round, because most of the old SWAT vehicles we used, they could stop a round or two, but that was it. These armored vehicles will continually stop rounds. Mm-hmm. Why would I not want my officers in that vehicle as they made the approach, and then behind armor protected shields, moving to the building behind a shield with their armor protection helmets and gear, because it isn't worth losing an officer to get into that house. Why would I want to lose an officer to save another person? I know it's our job and we do it, and I've done it myself. I've gone in those houses 15, 18, 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I remember going into a house on the west end of town, me and another rookie patrolman, when the supervisor said, the guy shot at his wife, he's in the attic, go in and get him. Bulletproof vest, routine bulletproof vest, no armor, no helmet, with a 357 Smith and Ruger 6-shot pistol. Right. Both of us worked our way to the guy's attic, and luckily he put his 9mm semi-automatic weapon down and surrendered to us. Today, we would call in NEMLIC or our special operations team, which we have in Methuen, all geared up behind some armor, and have them go in the house because they train monthly. They're expert shots. They carry flashbangs. So yes, there is a concern, and you know what? You have to be crazy if you believe there isn't a concern, because concern is what keeps everybody straight. Oversight keeps us doing the right things. And the day we make a mistake and we do something wrong, call us on it, and I'll admit it and we'll correct it. Right.
But the day you guys make a mistake, someone dies, and that's the problem.
Well, you know what? It may be. It doesn't necessarily mean you made a mistake and somebody dies. It can result in injury or could result in no injury. But we have to make the best decisions we make based upon all our tactical training. And I have been criticized for 12 years because I don't sit in the desk. Why are you out there at the scene? One, you open yourself up to more liability, but if you have your command staff or your chief, even my captains, out at a scene, you have the oversight that you need. That's why we need to have trusted leaders in place. But yes, there is a concern about over-militarization of law enforcement, but isn't it just a response to what we're seeing? When did you see criminals on the streets with fully automatic AK-47s or M4 rifles, or flashbangs or hand grenades, or pull over a car with 6 rifles and 5 handguns?
Sure.
As you look around the country, you see that. What did we see 25, 28 years ago? We saw 5 guys fighting and everybody had a gun.
Right.
But they all had one gun.
Right.
And they were using handguns and mainly revolvers. Today, they could have a handgun with a 10, 12, 15-round magazine. I just saw a Glock 229 magazine that's a 30-round capacity magazine. So somebody could possess these. So if I go to a domestic and there's 2 people at the domestic, I want 4 cops. So if I go somewhere and you have a knife, I want a handgun. If you have a handgun, I want a rifle. If you got a rifle, I want an armored vehicle. Right. We always need to be one step ahead with the intent of keeping people safe.
See, I'm of 2 minds of this, because I agree with you. The criminals are outgunning the cops. They've got better equipment, they've got better ammunition, they've got better guns, they have more access to more guns. On the other hand, though, the First Amendment guy inside of me sees this NEMLEC situation where they won't even tell anybody what they're spending. They've created this semi-private public organization that they're claiming is private. I don't know that I buy that. And I support NEMLEC. I know Methuen's part of it, and I know a lot of guys on that unit. I love those guys, because if someone's holding my daughter hostage, I want those guys to show up.
I agree.
The concern, though, is that because politicians are in charge, and because they're civilian politicians who run the show, that are the ones that basically give police their orders most of the time, that it can be abused. That can be used for maybe political purposes, or that it can be abused for other things. What is your experience?
Well, actually, and I like that you brought that up, because NEMLIC, which is the Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, Methuen has been a charter member since its origination over 30 years ago. And I sit on their board because all the chiefs sit on their board. NEMLIC will not come into a community without the police chief calling. So my mayor, my city council president, my local activist, Linda Susie, cannot call NEMLIC and say, come in and patrol or take the situation. And when NEMLIC, based on their charter, when NEMLIC responds to Methuen, which they have on many occasions to aid us, they are under the control and direction of the local police chief. So I could say to them...
So they're not their own, because I'm reading all this ACLU stuff, and I agree with some of their concerns, I just don't think it's going to go where they think it's going to go. Their concern is that these guys are, some rogue separate agency that is a conglomeration of cops from different departments who... think that, they're the Marines now, and they just kind of go in and do what they want to do. You're saying that's not true. They come in and they're under the direct control of the police chief in that community.
Correct. And see, they're giving you half-truths. It is a conglomerate of 54 different police departments and 2 sheriff's departments. However, if I called them and said, I have a barricaded subject at, 90 Hampshire Street, I'm using the police address, and the person's barricaded, and I need a SWAT team to respond. When they arrive, there's a SWAT commander there's 2 police chiefs, the Wilmington police chief and the Tewksbury police chief, and there is a 3rd police chief from the SWAT unit, and I can't remember what city he's from, but I deal with the 2 Tewksbury and Wilmington chiefs. They'll arrive and they'll say, Chief, what do you want us to do? I'll say, I want you to negotiate. I want everyone else to stand back, and we'll negotiate. And then I'll say, you know what, I can't get any further where we are. What is your expert advice? And they'll give us the advice, but the final call is mine. If I decide not to go in, they don't go in. So they are under the control of the local chief, so we can be comfortable that your local city chief is actually controlling what's going on.
All right, I guess we're supposed to be going to a break. How long has Shakira been playing?
A few minutes.
All right, very good. I apologize, those at home. I had the monitor down because I was just so... I'm fascinated by Chief Joe Solomon for a couple of reasons. One is that he's so open about everything that's going on. And it's very hard to get a police chief who just calls it like it is and says openly exactly what's going on without couching every word and trying to sound like a politician. And the other reason is because he likes us and he comes in and he talks to us. So when we come back, I'm going to ask the chief, get ready for your answers now. I want to talk about drugs. Drugs in the Merrimack Valley, the drug epidemic. Is it a health issue? Is it a police issue? We'll talk about all that when we come back. Here on Paying Attention, where everybody gets it, even Ray on the line has probably been there for about 25 minutes. We'll get to you, Ray, I promise. How'd we go from Alan West and Nick Kalopoulos? One of these things is not like the other.
If you've never been to Boston, you gotta see our town. We got some famous places and we're known the world around. And when you come to Boston, there's so many things that you can do. So many things that you can do. But there ain't no such thing.
Another Methuen guy. There's another Methuen guy, Chief. We're doing a whole Methuen theme today. This is Rick Pisano.
Oh, very good.
From Methuen. He's a blues singer.
Nice voice.
He's got a very unique voice, which is what I like.
That rasp to it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. For blues anyway. I think if he was doing a different kind of music, it might not work. 978-454-4980 is the number. We will take your questions via Twitter. We will take your phone calls if you'd like to call in and ask a question. But we've got about 15 minutes left, and I really want to touch on this. We could do a whole 2 hours. Is Weaver coming in?
I think so.
He is coming in. Yeah, figures. The day I could use the extra hour, he shows up. And when I don't, he doesn't show up. Before I ask my questions on the drug issue, Ray has been very patient, and I appreciate you being on the line. I didn't realize you were on the line because I didn't look at Chris for like 20 minutes, and I should have. Go ahead, Ray, with your question for Chief Solomon from Methuen.
Sure. Hi, Joe. Listen, I got to ask a question. Has anybody ever considered that maybe, when we know about the AWACS at this point, we know about all the technology that's available, and for years how the different law enforcement agencies haven't really shared information for one reason or another, and it's been turned around for a number of years now, and we're working more in that direction. But like when we build a building like a school, some of these technologies, you would think that they would integrate it right into it, like we were discussing the fact that the children aren't dying now because of fires, because we have alarm systems built in for fire prevention. When you have something like this detection device, it would almost seem to be enhanced to turn around and put something like maybe the ones that they have for we have in the military for gunpowder detection on the kids' clothes. If they're anywhere near gunpowder or any explosive material, that it alerts so that we get a heads up. And I think the proactive aspect of everything, and I'm sure I won't even have to ask Joe, because I think you probably agree, is the way to go with this. And the more steps up ahead we are, what could possibly happen, and some people don't even grasp that. Some people get very offended by losing the trade-offs. But I think human life has a greater value than maybe losing it. I think the most hysterical story, real quick. I was in Germany. I was an MP for a long time, and exactly I was a soup. So now here I'm like the equivalent of a chief. So now I'm coming out of my housing area, and I'm late. I get hit on an infrared camera. And over there, the cameras come and the photographs come, and there I am in full empty uniform. Quite embarrassing. And the photograph comes to you with your license plate number, your speed, and it's just absolutely no way of fighting this, and it gets set right to your command.
Do you have a question for the chief?
Kind of stuff, even though the more technology we can put out there, the less we have to tie up in manpower, and these things like that are a given. I messed up.
Ray, I know you're on hold. Ray, I know you're on hold for a long time, but do you have a question?
I'll let you go and feedback on this now.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Ray.
Ray, thank you for calling in. You know, what I did find interesting in your question at the beginning was, shouldn't these new technologies become requirements? And I was invited to testify for the Governor's School Safety Council probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I testified about early detection and warning of behavioral issues and of technology. And I gave a presentation on the study that we've done on a shooter detection system in a school and what that shooter detection system can mean. And our hope is that when the Governor's Council issues, the Governor's Committee, which is a cross-secretarial committee, issues its findings, that we believe they're going to say that new technologies that help detect weapons and that help detect shots similar to the smoke detector for gunshots will be part of those recommendations. So we're all watching for that report, and it should be out any single day. And thank you for calling and asking that question.
978-454-4980. Chief, we talked for about 2 hours one day, I think maybe the last time you were on the program, about the drug issue in the Merrimack Valley. In 10 minutes left, I mean, we can't even begin to touch what I wanted to do. But this has been so fascinating, and I just kind of want to wrap up with this. You have seen, because of the location of Methuen, because 93 is right there, 495 is right there, you've got the 213 interchange, you're right on the border of New Hampshire. You guys are perfectly located for drug dealers.
Absolutely.
I mean, they love, and I've even talked to some when I chase police calls and they're being locked up and we chat with them. They love Methuen. They love Methuen because it doesn't have the reputation of Lawrence. It's got a lot of really high-priced neighborhoods where they can pull in quietly and they can do their deal where they think no one's going to cause them any problems. It's centrally located with 28, as I said, 213, 495. How are you handling that? I mean, I've seen the huge influx of drug dealing and drug use in the Methuen area. How are you guys handling it?
Well, good question, Tom. And you know, earlier I talked about layers of defense. So we use layers. Back when I noticed the large overdoses, you know, just before Christmas time, I had asked for a regional chiefs meeting. We brought Haverhill, Lawrence, Methuen, Salem, New Hampshire, Andover, North Andover together, and we put together our task force because it's a mobile issue and it affects the Merrimack Valley. So what we're doing is in Methuen we doubled the size of our drug task force in Methuen offices. We've also forged all those relationships, so everybody's working together monthly. We're communicating info, and we even did an operation where we worked in each other's cities, which I found to be very valuable, and I had done it back in the late 90s with Lowell and Havel, and I thought it worked exchanging
How
offices.
does that help you in Methuen, having worked in another community like Lowell or Lawrence?
Well, what it helps is what we find is my user goes to your city to buy, or my dealer goes to your city to sell. And the anonymity of being able to be in a city and no one knows who you are. So now you have officers from all the Merrimack Valley working together and in other cities, and they look and say, whoa, there's Joe Solomon. Hey, he's one of our dealers. Or, hey, I locked him up last week for using. So they start following him, and it takes away that anonymity. The other part is it's a shared of information. And Ray also mentioned about shouldn't we share info? And we are sharing info, and that works really well. So that's part of it. We also work with the Essex County Sheriff's Department, and they have a sergeant who's assigned to a DEA task force, and we have an officer assigned to an FBI task force. So we've been able to bring those groups in. But that's the police side. Now, we talked about before, what about the human services side? Well, Diana DeZoglio, Representative DeZoglio, started the Merrimack Valley Substance Abuse Task Force. We joined that task force with Phil Leahy, and it's grown. Greater Lawrence Mental Health is in it. We have monthly meetings. We're preparing, I believe the date is September 23rd. We're going to do, and I can double check the date for you, we're going to do a big event at the Armory, which is public education, because we were having our pre-conversation off the air, and it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this person was using, and this person's close to me, and I hear this from parents all the time. Oh, I didn't think there was anything wrong with my son. I know he changed a little, but he's growing. He's getting big, and this is what happens. No, this was your son using drugs. Did you realize 17 pieces of jewelry were missing from your house?
Right.
Did you realize this? So we're going to do this big education program with the Merrimack Valley Substance Abuse Task Force, which I'm a member of, and it's going to be at the Armory at the end of September. And the goal is to educate parents, what can you do, and to show you resources. The other thing is, as part of this task force, we had a man come to us, and I could wish I could remember his name, but it's called Heaven for Hope. He took over the old St. Carmel School, and he's going to make that a sober house for women. And I think there's between 20 and 30 beds.
That's sexist.
Well, you know what, Tom? And you know what his reason? He had a couple of reasons for it. And one of them is, if we had a sober house for men, would the neighbors go wild? And they'd be, oh, there's going to be sex offenders there, there's going to be male drug addicts. And he's faith-based. And as we look, and I look back, the origins of community policing, and Weed and Seed was the faith-based organization.
Right.
God forbid we say God in a public building.
Right.
God forbid we pray.
Right.
I mean, but you know what? What happened, as we've seen from the 50s moving forward, is as the faith-based has moved away, crime and disorder and drug has increased. So a faith-based organization like this Heaven for Hope will help at least those women. But it gives us somewhere we could say, we have somebody who's detoxing, will you take them? So what we're working with the Merrimack Valley Drug Task Force, Rehabilitation Task Force, is giving us beds to put someone who needs help, and giving resources to, I'm a parent with children, you're a parent, someone who has young children. Who can you go to find education? What does a drug look like? What are the signs and symptoms? What questions could I ask my kid? If I see my child's phone and it has certain words on it, are those words the name of a drug, or is it some type of a secret code they're using? So we have to worry about the individual. We have to focus on behavioral and social services, because law enforcement alone is not going to solve the problem. We're going to solve the problem through social services. And this is the nice side of law enforcement. Being able to care about people.
Do you guys know, I know that you took a lot of crap nationally for arresting the Facebook terrorist.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, though, as we go through these conversations today, how you guys use social media when you're trying to track drugs, when you're trying to track drug dealers. Are you guys monitoring their Twitter accounts? Are you looking to see where their activities, if they're checking in at TGI Fridays at the Loop, but you know they're a drug dealer from Westford somewhere.
Right.
Are you guys currently using that kind of technology to kind of monitor people that you know are, maybe they are not committing a crime right now, but you know that they're involved in criminal activity?
Well, we do, and we also, we're aware of a website that's used. It's similar to Craigslist, but it's a local website where when kids steal items, they put them up there for sale. So we watch that constantly, but we're also watching our social media. But you know what the bigger part of social media is? The messages we receive. I received 2 messages last week through social media. Hey, check out this person. When I went to their website, they had drug paraphernalia and drugs, marijuana growing in their apartment. in our city, openly showing it and talking about it for sale. So that I give it to my drug unit. Now we do it manually, but we've been working with a company called Media Sonar for about 4 months, and we were ready to sign a contract with them, but it was the end of the fiscal year, so we're going to go back to them. And this, not only is it for monitoring it for crimes being committed, like for drug dealing, but for safety of children and crimes being committed. This Media Sonar, in a major incident, a flood, the storm the other night, God forbid, a shooting at some location, we'll be able to use our Media Sonar, pull up that geographical area in a map, and see every public tweet or every public Facebook post or Instagram picture that comes out, and
From that area.
From that area.
That's
Or we
amazing.
can look at the whole world, but we could zoom in on that area. And then what I found is, if you get the law enforcement version and say it's in WCAP's building, I could zoom in and say it's the second floor, third window from the right, the person's in that office. They might be saying, help, I need help, I'm
Right,
here.
right.
It's going to pinpoint their location in the
Wow.
building. So the technology that's out there is unbelievable. So
Do
we're
you worry
looking
about
at it
abuse?
all.
I mean, I know you're not an abusive chief, but God forbid you leave tomorrow, Methuen gets some nutcase who is, who just has no respect for our privacy.
Mm-hmm.
You said with NEMLEC it's up to the chiefs that run it. And I think what the privacy concerns, the First Amendment concerns that people like me have is, what happens if we get a guy who's not a Joe Sullivan? How, can it be abused? Do you worry about that?
There is a possibility for abuse, but that's why we have you. People like Tommy Duggan who are going to fight and find out what's going on and talk about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and the abuses that might be going on. That's where it's important. The news media has to watch us, and believe me, we all know I was beaten and battered for like 4 years, but guess what? I survived, and I'm back here. So it's hard
I
to
was
see
fair,
it sometimes. You were fair.
Yeah.
Some other press wasn't
Oh,
fair.
I see.
But and I have to say, and I didn't mean that about Tom Duggan. You were very fair to me. You reported the facts and let people make the decisions. But we need people like you, and we need our citizens to stand up and say, ask the question. Show up at City Council. I'm not happy with this, and I want some answers.
Right.
Demand your law enforcement leaders show up at your City Council and be accountable. And I'll be there every time someone has a question.
We've got 3 minutes left. Tell us something people don't know. Give us some breaking news. Tell us something that's going on in Methuen that people aren't talking about, that once you say it, we're going to be able to get people to talk about.
Well, it's interesting because I talked about like the biggest things that we had, which was the new shot detection system. That was really the biggest focus that we had, and I think everybody knows about our new school, and I'll talk about something schools because it's exciting to me. Our new high school will be opened in September, and I think it's just phenomenal to have walked through that building and see the commitment the city and the school did to our children, because it's not all about law enforcement when you're the police chief. It's about the whole community, and really anyone who has an opportunity to go to our high school and check out what the superintendent and the mayor have done there is phenomenal. And we welcome them down there. I wish I had some other great breaking news, but my biggest news came in the beginning of your show.
How long is your contract?
I have a 3-year contract, which only covers till salary under civil service. I'm here till I'm 65 if I wish. My plan is to stay the next 5 years and then reassess at 5 years when I'll reach my retirement.
Yeah, we don't want you to go.
Okay, well, thank you.
If I start to find out, and I'll hear before you tell me, if I start to find out you're thinking of leaving for any reason, I'm going to come down on you.
Well, thank you. I
Because
appreciate it.
you're a great asset to the community, not just to the Valley Patriot or to WCAP. Because unlike most police chiefs, they don't want to talk about this stuff. They're very parochial, and I know you know this because you've been to chief conferences where you get the snot kicked out of you by other police chiefs for letting stuff out on Twitter about what your department is doing.
Correct. Absolutely. I've taken a lot of heat from police chiefs for doing school lockdowns back when we were doing them with SWAT teams and for using social media. But if I could close with something that's really important to me,
Sure.
dear, and to my heart, I just want to thank everyone that works for me, both sworn and civilian. As we just saw the other night at the fireworks, over 30 officers assigned to the fireworks, 10 officers on the shift, and then all hell broke loose with the storm, and we had to order some officers in on a holiday, the day before a holiday. Our civilians were there. People always say all the time about, wow, you're successful, you do a great job, but you know what? I just reap the rewards of the people that work for me, and truly from my heart. In the past 3.5 years, I'm so proud of the officers and the civilian staff I have. It means a lot to me, and I'm the guy who comes down on everybody. I never get to say thank you to them. So I'd like to take today as a chance to say thank you to everybody that works for me, and a special thank you to their family, because their family, their husbands, wives, and their children and their partners miss them the most when they're working for us. And thank you for having me on
And
today.
you're welcome. You read the Valley Patriot?
I read it all the time.
And you live in Methuen.
And I live in Methuen.
That just goes to show that Steve Zani's full of crap. He called into my show one day and he said, no, I knock on doors. Nobody reads your paper. No one listens to your show.
Well, I read your paper and I listen to your show.
And you live in Methuen.
And I
a
live in
police
Methuen.
chief who lives in his own community where the drug dealers and the criminals know where he is. That takes a lot of guts, and I have a lot of respect for you. Thank you very much, Chief Solomon, for coming in. The podcast will be up probably within the hour. And then I got to get to bed because I'm going to be working straight through the next 3 days.
We don't have drugs in Westford.
You know, no drugs in Westford. Tom Weaver, the classical liberal, is coming up next. Hopefully he can incorporate some of what we talked about today into his show. Melvin Taylor says go home, so go home already.
That's all right.
I can't
But make sure you keep tuning in for Tom Weaver, the classical liberal. Did you ever find Davy Crofton's musket?
No.
Damn it.